Howdy. Welcome back. Welcome to Escaping Dystopia. My name's Roy. I'm from Texas. Today is October 11th, 2018. It's episode 68. Dang old full-on election hurricane season going on. So we're going to be talking about things like that tonight. As we're going through this real quick, first thing I'm going to run through, as I do every week, or whatever, week or two. Talk about what I'm going to be talking about. First time I'm just going to talk about it, then I'll talk about it when I'm talking about it. Kind of like a recursive thing. So, first up, tonight I'll talk about Spaceship Earth, our origin story. I talked about this a little in the show last week about a new kind of like basis for morality, and we'll talk a little bit about that kind of stuff, where people came from, things like that, little things. Judge Kavanaugh got confirmed to the Supreme Court. So they came back. FBI was like, I don't know, man. We can't charge him with murder or terrorism. And he didn't, rape everybody ever. So they confirmed Kavanaugh. This will come at a cost to the Republican Party, I think. We'll talk about that a little bit more. We'll talk a little bit about that Mormon morality stuff. You may or may not be aware, but 3 of the 11 Republicans, might be the last time I say it like that, on that dang old committee, they's Mormons. So 3 of them. We're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. International order update. So some weird things have been going on, like people are getting shot and dying or disappearing, getting arrested. Dang old strange things. We'll talk about that a little bit more once we get back to the international order update, because we need to talk about some of these things and why they might be happening and what could possibly have changed about the world, where people like, yeah, the hat, hat's awesome, love it. Dang old international order is changing. People doing weird shit. We'll talk about that. Apparently there's both a rally going on that Trump's going on and a hurricane next fucking door. I guess that's cool. I don't know. You'd think maybe be maybe we should be watching this hurricane that's hurting people, but he's rallying. So there's some voter registration shenanigans have been going on. I don't know if you heard about this neither. Down in Georgia, down in Texas for sure. A little bit other places. We'll talk about that. That's kind of one of them things that just kind of well, shit, man. I said I was going to vote. Now, how you saying I can't vote none? I was like, well, yeah. And I was like, but I said I was gonna. And they're like, well, we didn't. It doesn't say you was gonna. Dang old voting. We'll talk a little bit about the China narrative. What they're gonna try and say China's been doing, China. China. Trade wars having real effects, folks. Don't know if you saw this, but Chinese was like, hey, man, we need money. And their banks was like, okay, money. And their stock market was like, that's not weird. And so it crashed last week. And then this week, the U.S. stock market was like, what the fuck's going on, man? And we'll talk about why it dropped 1,500 points in the last couple days. Seriously, that's a lot of points. And it went down. Those are good points to go up, right? You get more money. But if they go down, that's not good. And, it's the lies that are the fascism, folks. It's the lies. The lies of the fascism. I don't know if I have to keep saying that, or if I just make some weird accent and say it, and then people are like, whoa, shit, damn, the lies, that's the fascism, shit. Apparently in Virginia, there is this trans girl, this young lady, left outside in the middle of the hall during a drill. There was a disaster drill because they couldn't decide if she should go to the ladies' locker room or the gentlemen's locker room. Stupid shit. Come on, man. Just ask them. Say, what? Where are you going? I'm going here. Why is that? Because I'm a lady. Boom. Done. Got that? It's not that hard, folks. A lot of people don't have the greatest childhoods, and there's things that happen that are much different than what everyone else experiences. And the idea here on Spaceship Earth is be cool about that. Alright, so there's a citizenship question. It's going to be on the census. They're going to be like, are you from here? You here legally, motherfucker? I don't think they're putting the motherfucker on there, but that's going to kind of sound like it. It's like, are you here legally, motherfucker? Or, no, they're not going to put the... They're probably thinking about... There's lawsuits. I don't know if the motherfucker's going to get on there, but I'm guessing. You here legally, motherfucker? Is what it's going to sound like to anybody who reads it. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And, what else we got? Oh, yeah, apparently there was a little girl. She was about 5 years old, and they took her to court and said, hey, if you sign this, you can see mommy and daddy again. And the little girl signed it. They put her on a plane. Who knows where she at now? You motherfuckers! All right, sorry. Yeah. All right, so, anyway, I'm going to keep the hat on, because I like the hat. I'm not going to say that I don't like the hat. I find the hat enjoyable. So we're going to wear the hat. Alright, so getting back up to the top. We're trying to work on the new format. I think it's working okay. So, talking the first thing. So I got this thing a while back, like one of these flyers from one of the churches here in the area. And it was like, blah, 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 and this and that and the other and all these question things. And I was like, this would be a good way to talk about some of the philosophy stuff, because I've always wanted to do that as part of the whole escaping dystopia thing, and that's kind of part of what a lot of my writing and life stuff's about. So, last week we talked a little bit about this Spaceship Earth concept, right? This notion that this planet that we're on is actually a ship that our species is using to travel through space, which doesn't sound particularly far-fetched if you think about it, as opposed to this planet being something that was created by these extra-dimensional supernatural beings and gifted to a couple people in Israel a while back. So those are kind of like the competing narratives on the origin of our species. There's a couple other ones too, and that's what I was going to talk about tonight, because this stuff is really fun. And it's that question on, and because it's one of those, that's what we're starting these segments off, like some of the big questions, because I wanted to cover these a little bit as we go, because I'm doing the show for a long time, gonna be, and so this is gonna be some of the foundational stuff. Anyway. So how did I get here? What am I like? This is kind of that question, that big question that a lot of people ask. And we have this wonderful answer that we've seen grow up of, well, you were created, no, by this thing, what? It's all in this chapter right here. Okay. So that doesn't, the supernatural kind of biblical explanation for how people got here, to me, is extremely limited. And there's this thing, this metaphor I was talking about. And one of the concepts that I wanted to cover here is not that previous existing models for moral concepts were completely and utterly worthless, right? Just that there's much better ways to do it now. It's not that these are like the idea of this is kind of like a car, right? This is a useful tool for thinking about things, for getting places that your feet can't take you, right? This kind of building this kind of moral model for a society to follow to get someplace that we can't get to right now or would like to go that's a little bit further away. So it's about building a better model and building a better car, which is not to say that this other car doesn't exist and can't work. It's just that there are better ways to build it that's more functional and more efficient, right? Instead of having something that's, Fred Flintstone with his feet just pushing around. I mean, you have something that's tied into the global network and run on solar power and, some much more interesting ways to do this, like cars, like teleporters. So, I mean, there's much better cars than sometimes we have, and that's the kind of thing. So, on this, we have this, just created on the one side, and then on the other side we have this beautiful, wonderful evolutionary theory that talks and goes through and follows and has this wonderful explanation for our entire, this flora and fauna that we see all over the place and how things are tied together. And it's something that's so rich and learning. We're still learning about this tree of life that we found on this planet, and as we've started to look into other places, and we have this model showing up that's a little bit more interesting on, how life came to be here, right? That it evolved from these other previous species and continued to change and adapt to environmental habits, right? Over these huge, tremendous periods of time, not through, well, this guy begat that guy, and that guy begat that guy, and that guy begat that guy. And it takes about, 20, 25 years to begat. And so, no, I mean, when you're talking millions of years of evolution, these are time frames beyond, really, it's difficult to comprehend, really, when we have our daily cycle, like this million-year cycle and things like that, and this notion that, we were closer to some of the other dinosaurs than some of the other dinosaurs were to the other dinosaurs, right? So there's just these huge amounts of time that allow for these changes, which is really interesting, too, because we're still learning so much about this kind of stuff. There was actually a thing I was thinking, and that was one of the things I was going to talk about tonight. And one of the things that I find so interesting about this stuff is, you have a more model of disprovability, right? It's not just, this is the way things are, but this is the way things are based on the things that we know. And as people learn new things, we get more knowledge. Like, it was one of the stories that I was reading and looking about this week was about this archaea, which is a form, basically a branch of life. Like, kind of, we have two major branches, and you can look into this. I had to do a lot of background reading. I don't know all this stuff off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've been in science college. But you have, our eukaryotes and prokaryotes, right, are two different types of cellular organisms, basically bacteria and everything else, until about, 40 years now, I guess, early 70s, when they found that there were these particular bacteria that, while they were like the other ones, they actually had other traits that were more like this entire other line of life, like our, when you get to the plants and animals and fungi, all those people with these cellular walls and nucleuses in their cells. But they ended up having a much larger genome than what they had thought. So it looked like there was this whole new, or it actually turned out to be this entire new branch of life, and it was that question of, well, were we actually closer to these other things that were actually not actually bacteria, were actually really, really advanced bacteria, or something else? And this is where, because these are the things that they would find in these more extreme environments. Like, these are the kind of stuff that they find, like, by thermal vents down at the bottom of the ocean, and doing stuff like eating methane and, producing, like, having this entire ecosystem that an entire metabolism that's entirely not oxygen based like some of the other stuff. So you have that live in an environment that's not what we consider to be Earth per se, this 600 degree no oxygen thing, right? Basically the kind of stuff that can survive through interstellar travel, right? And that's where we get to one of the concepts that I'm a big fan of, actually. Is called panspermia, which, if you think about it for a moment, it's kind of, yes, life everywhere. And that one of these things, especially over when you take the spans of time that people have available to them in the length of the universe, which is that billions of years, you have the chance for these spores, essentially, to go anywhere and travel all over the place through comets and destruction and just pass along. I mean, we see on every body that we have in our solar system this consistent reign, right, of interaction with things from various... So it's not too hard to think that this kind of stuff can travel around. And this is one of the things that, as we send more probes, like there was in the last couple of weeks, a Japanese probe that went to another asteroid, and we'll see more and more of this, and those that are, hopefully, right, and some that are more focused on searching specifically for this kind of stuff in life. So we have a way to look into this theory and go further with it. And there's also, and this is kind of what I think is kind of fun also about having this kind of understanding of our interaction with this spaceship that we've evolved on and where we're taking it to, because you can actually, even with this kind of scientific take on our evolution as a species, take it all the way to that kind of mystical kind of New Age connection level, right? Because when you go to the core of it, right, everything that we're made of is the same stuff that all this other stuff is made of. And you know, the hydrogen and the oxygen and the same kind of stuff that was, you know, as, you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about, you know, that's made in the star stuff, right? And all of the heavier elements and stuff that make us up were actually born through these supernova, who knows how long ago, and formed into these atoms that continue to be stable for how many ever billions of years it took to get to that point. And even in that, whether or not there is a true ability to have that kind of conscious connection between that stuff that is made of that stuff and the rest of that stuff, right? That feeling of oneness or closeness to the universe, eudaimonia or whatever, I don't remember exactly the word for it. I think that's a real kind of thing, right? And this kind of model of the whole spaceship Earth concept, in the moral sense, has that same aspect to it. So you don't actually lose that, I don't think, going to a more, you know, science-based approach and worldview. All right, so to the news stuff. So we have a new Supreme Court justice, Brett Kavanaugh. This is sad. It's a tough day, really, on the spaceship in this room, because this is gonna change quite a bit if it sticks. Now there's some, and I'm going to talk about this too much, but the investigation into this guy really didn't go too very far, and how far it will go if we have some Democratic power in Congress, whether or not they'll look into or actually order the FBI to complete some of these investigations, or if somebody's going to actually care that he lied to the Senate. But I think the Senate's the only one that can actually care about that. There are potential for impeachment stuff, but any kind of mass impeachment or any that kind of thing, again, and this is why the people who actually know this and aren't just like, I'm a billionaire, impeach him, like that Steyer guy or whatever, the guy who's funding a bunch of crap. It takes 2/3 of the Senate to do it. Just that's what the rules are, unless you want to change the rules, and then it takes even more. So yeah, it takes 2/3 of the Senate to impeach. So the plan, right, is to get the House or one of the houses and then take back the White House and hopefully save the country at that point. With the Supreme Court, this is going to be, I mean, it's just tough. I mean, the president came out and basically gloated about this, which, of course, is that incredibly bad form that he knows about. And he lied and said, he's been cleared by this investigation, which you see also with the sample of what happens here with an investigation they can control what's going to come out of it. Because, again, there's been a tradition in the country where the chief executive does not have that kind of hands-on power, but the stuff that's in place to stop them is not there when there isn't even that sense that they shouldn't, right? Like, even with Nixon, who had come from that line of respecting the law, he had an actual respect for the law and these processes. With the current president, we have none of that. And he very much approaches this like kind of a mob boss kind of mentality, and it's most of the system of our electoral system was designed to prevent something like that happening, being elevated to this level of power. So we did find out that the FBI confirmed that they didn't really look into any of the stuff that people were really getting pissed off about. And I think this will have a lasting effect. I don't think that women are going to forget about this really all that quickly. And this is one of the things. I mean, and also this guy, he literally vowed revenge on a whole ideology from under oath, and this is going to be brought up again and again in his case. And he's going to, of course, claim that he's completely impartial, like he did again. But it's just bullshit. And so that level, and when you have that kind of, bullshit mixed into every interaction with something, and it's not acknowledged, that's just the corruption of the system, and everybody sees that. And so you had the Supreme Court becomes tainted just through this, and the whole approach, everything about this has been really pretty rough. And so we'll see. And that it's been rough, and that he was forced through, and that he has those sexual assault allegations, right? It all goes together. And for them to come around and be like, oh yeah, this is really going to fire up the Republicans for a long time, yeah. I don't think that's going to happen. And, I mean, now you have an unquestionably biased Supreme Court. I've been doing something, and this is kind of my read array thing, and I should probably do like a quick little short video about just the whole read array change. Because I'm not really calling them the Republicans anymore. They're the Ray. Not Republicans, Republicans. And I think that's actually a pretty accurate term now. I mean, you can go back. They've been this party, and it's kind of just declined continuously over the years. And then you had the Tea Party come in and do this ridiculous, like, so thinly veiled racist crap. And now you have this where they all turn a blind eye when the guy's literally bragging about sexually assaulting women. And they just went with it. And so and now you've got this again, the same kind of thing, and they're all like, oh, you accused everybody. No, not everybody gets accused of this. And that's the thing, it's just, it does happen, it is real, and some people do this. And some people are going to get accused of that. The way that they've approached this whole thing, claiming that it was all this setup and she's lying and was proven wrong, it's disgusting. And it's really, really, really just horrid. And I don't think we're going to... I think a lot of the Republicans think the country's going to move on like other things. And I don't think that that's going to happen the way that they think it is. I think there's quite a few more... And that's the thing, too. If you have 10%, 20% of that evangelical women that break, that's a decent part of the core of what's left of the popular vote of the non-thinking Republican Party. Again, you've got, like, the rich assholes that run it, and then the asshole guys that have no place else to go that are part of the Republicans. But there's also this large number of white women that continue to stick with that. And when you have something that can actually break through that to, a tune of 5 or 10%, that's something that actually compounds over time. Because it's not like people get outside of a political party and then, like, immediately jump back into it. Especially on that kind of stuff. And so I don't know if this is going to be what does provide one of the big breaks into the GOP. I'm not excited about the election coming up, because you hate to see, like, oh yeah, everybody's been so treated shittily, they'll so vote against them. Because I know that's not really the way it works, and that's not necessarily the way people think. But it would be nice to see that show up to a degree that they're like, whoa! Read array. So that brings us to that Mormon morality update. So one of the things, and I just, full disclosure, I was actually raised as a Mormon. That's why I use this a lot as a foil, which is a bit odd, of course, but it is what it is. So they had their general conference, their big meeting. I remember it the best because you didn't have to go to church for 3 hours that Sunday, which was always nice. And apparently this year they changed it down to 2 because that did not test well in the marketplace. So apparently, like many other religions, they're kind of hemorrhaging young people because the internet exists and people get tired of losing arguments wildly, I'm sure. I don't know what it's like to try and convince people that, no, Native Americans are actually Hebrews, and no, the slaves they all wanted to do that. Which is, by the way, like, literally part of, like, Mormon theology. And that's one of the things that when you get into this, and I use this as kind of the foil for the Spaceship Earth, but this supernatural take on things, things don't make sense beyond a certain thing. You can't, like, draw the logical kind of stuff. So one of the things that the church is really facing the power now, especially with the Me Too and even like the women's lib movement for 30 years, is the religion is specifically set up so that all the powers, all the mystical powers that are granted to the adherents flow through the priesthood, which is men only. And that's how God did it. It's God. I mean, and that's just the way it's always been for these things. And when they're all like things that happen, it's just coincidence it was designed by Ben. We're doing what God wanted. You can see the flaw in that, I would hope, right? Well, what's your justification for not allowing women to have ultimately any type of leadership roles in your organization? Well, God said that they can't have those powers. Can we talk to your God? No, you can't question the will of God. But how do we then? You're saying he just said you had to no women, huh? God. That's not a good argument, and it's not. But there's not any more than that, really. Ultimately, it's just it's what the guy said that God said. That's what it says here in the book. And that's the thing too, and the way that they have, and with this again, their very simplistic sense of human sexuality means that their take on, again, a culture that's more and more accepting of those who have for so long been in our fringes and shadows of society, that most of us have been like, all right, let's stop. Why are we doing this? It says in the book. Really? The book again? How about we just talk to these people? How about we meet them? Oh, yeah. Well, that one's a dick, but the rest of these people are pretty cool. I mean, hey, they're normal, right? The thing about, and this is one of the things that's been happening more in Utah, because they've had so many people with suicides and younger kids, and when you have a bully, when you have a culture that teaches that these people are just wrong and bad and confused on a hugely, deeply moral level, that they're inherently bad, and there's this mixed message, oh, well, just love them in their sin, and it's like, well, how about just love them and say that they're cool? And so it's become pretty clear to the next generation which one of those two approaches is a lot more enjoyable and works better. And so the church is trying to cut that off and saying, no, don't research things on the internet. There is something that's kind of interesting about from the Mormon morality thing, because their theology says that people in the pre-existence, before people came to the earth, they all picked the families that they would be with. That's kind of the idea that families are forever, from before you existed here and then afterwards. Which, of course, it leads to this really weird kind of justification, right? So someone like Reek, you may have heard him called Mitt Romney. I call him Reek. But he was born, right, into this very wealthy, powerful family, right? Great choice, right? Good job. Whereas all the other people born, into bondage or into, you're gonna be extremely poor in Europe right before the plague hits. Does that sound cool? Yeah, sign me up. It's like, that doesn't seem like something, but it's also weird because when you have this idea that everyone picked their place in life, the notion that you should change anything or rearrange the deck chairs or say, this isn't quite fair that this guy gets to do all these things and the rest of us have to slave away in coal mines, I don't think that's quite. It says in the book. What are you going to do? It says in the book. So, I just don't think that works. By the way, this is one of the other things. Mormons are no longer called Mormons. I don't write this stuff. I read it, and then I talk about it, and I'm not joking. The guy who became the president, this happened actually, I think a few months ago, the preferred nomenclature is Latter-day Saints. Yeah, that's not gonna work for me. So sorry. I'm not gonna call you saints when you shit on freaking everybody who's not gay. That's not straight. I'm sorry. Not gonna work. So how about we stick with Mormons? Cool? How about self-hating Mormons? Does that work? And it's also not the latter days. We're actually just getting started for the rest of humanity. You're waiting for a guy to come back to be, to be a prophet of God, build a thing that lasts for 1,000 years. Oh yeah, his name was Muhammad. He was in the Middle East. You guys missed it by about 400 years, but that's cool. You can go read about it. So that happened already. When you were waiting for Jesus to come back, it happened. So you missed it. Sorry. International order update. So the Russians killed a British guy with their operatives using the poison. They found out who they are. They actually captured the guys, I guess. We got them on video. We now have their passports, which were apparently sequentially numbered and had like the GRU, which is the new KGB, their headquarters, like address listed on there. The Russian, I don't care anymore. The Russian contact, remember that lawyer who met with Trump and the family at the Trump Tower? Her handler for the KGB died recently in a helicopter crash. It's weird. The pilot grew bullets somehow inside his body that they found. Saudi Arabia recently looks like they assassinated a journalist who had been critical of them. We'll talk about this. This is a much bigger story. China, the other day, arrested the head of Interpol, the international police. Israel is currently detaining a student, United States citizen student, for being part of a protest group organization. And phones are being searched the world over. That actually kind of thing. I think I was reading about some other, what I thought was a pretty normal country, was demanding passwords for phones. So there's been a pretty consistent drift, and this is actually starting to show up now in the international news towards that fascist thing, where when there's no repercussions for these kind of things, people start to test what they can get away with and what they can move. Because everybody, every country, every person, particularly more autocratic nations and dictatorial places, want to enforce that, right? And if you have a chance to go and make it, and if you can, the first time someone here in the U.S. gets killed directly for this and it's related to speaking out or something, or gets arrested, it has a very chilling effect. And if Saudi Arabia is able to go and pull journalists that are critical of them into a consulate in Turkey and murder them without any repercussions, that's not a good thing. If these international institutions have members like Interpol that disappear because China decides, well, he was too corrupt, so we made him go away. It's like, well, how do you... I thought he worked for somebody else. And the thing in Israel is also disturbing because this girl was a member of this boycott movement, which is one of the things that hopes to try and change Israel's behavior by affecting their business climate by boycotting businesses there. But now they're saying anybody who does that, and apparently anybody who's critical of the country cannot come in, depending on social media posts. And they passed a new law about that, as well as having a citizenship law. When the world loses a moral compass, and this is why I'm kind of make these things, and this is a little bit of that kind of big picture stuff, and why I'm wasting my time down here. I don't think I'm wasting my time, or I wouldn't be doing this. But when the world loses a moral compass, and that's one of the things that the U.S. had been for a long time, things spiral. And so we're seeing that now. So just be aware that's happening. And the stuff with the Saudi Arabia assassination is a bigger story. Apparently, when the Crown Prince called the White House, he asked to talk to Jared. Hey, Jared, remember that deal we just did? Yeah, we didn't. So, we didn't do anything about that journalist that disappeared in our consulate with 15 guys that flew in and then flew out an hour later, and we don't know anything about acid or anything like that, or pieces of what? No, anyway. Deal's going through, right? We'll see. I mean, if you can get away with that usually is how you respond to those kind of things, is say, hey, what's going on here? Do you guys do this? Come clean, or this doesn't happen, or, do this or do that. So, if we're not responding to bad action, and then this becomes allowable, that has repercussions. Again, one of the things that we try and talk about on the show is draw these patterns over time, as things that don't come up out of nowhere. And if tomorrow, we actually, one of the boats that almost ran into China a couple weeks ago does, and it sparks something crazy, we can show you the path to how we got to there. We'll talk about that here in just a second, but the voter, so the president is throwing rallies while there's hurricanes going on. You can't. And apparently even Fox isn't covering the rallies anymore, because for giving him free airtime, somebody finally decided, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that unless he pays us. You think? Voter registration shenanigans. So in Georgia, one of the guys running, the Republican, is the Secretary of State who oversees the elections. He's running against an African-American woman, one of the first, Stacey Abrams, one of the first in the South. He's apparently sitting on about 50 to 70,000, I don't remember the exact number, voter registrations, that are 70% of them are from African Americans. And he's not finishing them for whatever. Oh, this one looks like it might have been bent. It was bent. And see, therefore it's been mangled, and we can't accept. I don't know exactly what they're doing. When you don't have an authority, an attorney general who's going to oversee this kind of stuff and call bullshit on it, people can get away with these things, and when you only have to get away with it for a month before you get elected to be governor, and it goes away, you do that. Also happening a little bit in Texas. We'll see if we see more of that, because that's another place that's getting close, and so when things get close, people try and put thumbs on the scales. And that's where a lot of these local races matter. Voting for who your state attorney general is, that's who oversees this. It's not some mystical, oh man, they just always, because they go out and they vote for Republicans to cover for this kind of stuff. Remember, that's part of the reason why Al Gore lost, was because somebody's brother was the governor of the state where it was decided, and that wasn't seen as like. And the Supreme Court was appointed by his dad, right? I mean, so these things, these little, edges matter. That's why all the votes matter. And hopefully when I'm 60 and God damn, you people, y'all will listen, there won't be any more Republicans in power. The China narrative. So our trade war is having effects. We had a huge stock market drop last couple days. Just full disclosure, I did actually... last Friday, decided that it was a good time to pull some money out, and did so. And then, this is the third time in my life that I've done this kind of stuff, and then followed by a pretty big drop, because I follow this stuff pretty closely, and we're getting pretty ripe for it. And this is where the rubber hits the road in earnings. And once the U.S. starts projecting these $1.2 and $1.3 trillion deficits next year, as interest rates are already rising, and we're already paying as much for interest in our budget as we are for our military, people will realize that that's completely and utterly unsustainable, and all the money that's coming and where that's going and all the things that is sustaining will collapse when it collapses. So we'll see. There's definitely, people are like, oh, we're so robust, and there is a lot of robustness. We did build a lot of good things in good places, but that looming... Math doesn't give a shit about how big it is when you have a percentage of something. It just doesn't matter if it's a trillion or a quadrillion or bazillions or gazillion. if you're taking 10% of whatever that number is and compounding it, it will overwhelm whatever that number is. So it doesn't matter how big your economy is if your debt is too large. So we'll see what happens. China's also having some very interesting things. So I was going to say, let me see. So bond yields are really high right now. So they're like the 10-year is over 3%, which is kind of one of those benchmark things. Which means basically you can have no risk at all for your money and get a decent, like very substandard, but you can get a good return with no risk. So that's kind of the bottom for the investment risk. So if you can't get that, right, ultimately, then what are you doing? So people who don't think they can get in the stock market or another interest will park that money there, which pulls the money out of the stock market. So the global market might be looking pretty rough, right? Because you have this trade war going that's not looking to be resolved very soon and could spiral out of control very, very quickly. So you have a decent return from these bonds and less return from a saturated business market where some of your returns have that possibility for just going up in smoke or sitting and rotting in ports because nobody wants to let them in because of somebody's throwing a shit fit about whatever, some whiny crap that I don't even want to even try and think like him for half a second. So anyway, so we just hit this real high, a good peak for the market. The yawn yields are high, so money comes out. And if you're just doing speculative money and you start to see that where the market is turning, you'll probably get out now, quick to do that. And then you have another group, and I still think this is a significant group of people, the last gasp, kind of some of the baby boomers who are trying to make up for not investing for years and years and years and years and years, who really, really invested in stocks when they probably should be much more diversified at this point, where a market, and they're going to have to get out quick because they're going to be on an edge. So they're going to pull out real fast. So we'll see if this really turns into a rout over the next couple days. I think that it definitely has the potential. A lot of people have been waiting to see if you'd have a major correction like this. So I wouldn't doubt that the Dow Jones will drop to about 22,000, maybe 21. I don't think we'll break 20. That's a pretty big drop from where we're at now, by the way. So if that happens, I'll be right. If not, I'll be wrong. But I do think that the trade war is heating up, and I do think that they're planning on using the trade war as what they're going to run on in 2020 from right now, from what I can see. So it doesn't look like they're going to resolve the trade war with China anytime soon, which if it goes through a full year, then it does. So then you have a whole another year of setting up different supply lines and different deals through different places. So then even when it ends, it's not going to snap back. You won't have the kickback. So it becomes just a whole lot of sludge in the global economy. All right. So, excuse me. Almost done. The lies are the fascism. This is one of the things I keep trying to talk about. The New York Times did their big story this week about Trump's billions or whatever, however much money he claims to have, which changed depending on how he was feeling, which is like an actual quote. All his money came from his dad, funneled through some various schemes that he would have had a much less money. We might not even have heard about him. He might actually failed if he hadn't been like skipping taxes this whole time. Which again, people were like, "Oh, it was such a big story," and it went away. And it's like, well, we've known that he inherited money his whole time, and we know that he's a very skeevy businessman who just keeps getting away with it. So in the way that the American ethos kind of goes, and he actually is boasted about these exact things. So until somebody, like I've said a couple times, like actually holds him accountable for this, or we actually get to see his tax returns, which we can if the Dems win. Just saying. Then let's get that. But yeah, hopefully a few more people will not believe his BS about being a self-made businessman. But at this point, when you just BS your way all the way to the presidency, that's actually something. It sucks that you can just lie this whole way. It speaks to so much rot. So the citizenship question on the census, and I did want to say that trans student situation is I mean, it's just how you can tell that something is wrong when you look at it like this is not right. So the way that they're approaching it there in that situation, again, that's wrong. So don't do it like that. So there's been a lawsuit about this for a while because Ross and the other folks, and it turns out he actually did talk to Bannon about this. Steve Bannon, you remember him, the white supremacist national security advisor? Yeah, that guy. He talked to the Commerce Secretary, I think that's what Ross is, about the citizenship question, which is done by the census, which is under the purview of that department that Wilbur Ross runs. So basically he had said previously that he hadn't talked to anybody about it, and that the reason they were doing it was because in order to enforce the Voting Rights Act more effectively, just some like random bullshit excuse. And so through the various lawsuits that have already happened, they've gotten to the point where he's supposed to give a deposition about why he wants to add this question, and they're fighting that. They're fighting that very hard. Absolutely, Joe. He's been a confidence man his whole life. That's the whole idea. That's why he says, believe me and trust me so much, because the entire thing that he runs on is your belief in him. That's it. There's no facts. There's no reality that's external to anything between you and him. And that's it. He's a con guy. That's why he talks like that, and that's why he keeps always doing always, after, no, don't even, yeah. Con guy. Hopefully we'll get rid of him before too long. But anyway, the testifying about Wilbur Ross, he kind of lied about it, so hopefully they'll get him on a deposition when we have to say it, and hopefully they can keep this question off the census. The idea of the census, historically, was always to count bodies. It's a body count. Because when you're doing government services, you're doing them on a body count level. You're not ignoring flat out people who aren't citizens. And if you put on there, in this current environment, and this is again one of that thing where current Republican ideology is just completely intellectually bankrupt. Because they play dumb and don't think that, oh, well, we've got Trump in the office, and if we put a question on the census that says, is this person an American citizen, yes or no, people are just going to be like, oh yeah, totally, like this, my grandmother's here, she's not a citizen, I'll put that on there. She's got a green card, right, doesn't she? So they want to put that question on there, and they'll probably put somewhere on there that make it look like you have to answer that or you will go to jail. And so it's going to be, you're going to see if this actually comes out. This is a big battle, because this determines what those numbers are for how we divvy up things. And not that, I mean, it's all about those numbers, but this is important for schools, the list goes on. And if I was better prepared, I'd have a nice list, but I don't. Trust me, there's a list. There's a list. But this is a big deal. And this might actually go to the Supreme Court, and whether or not he has to give a deposition. I think it's already been appealed to the Supreme Court, because the Circuit Court, the last one, said he did, and now they're asking the Supreme Court. And then finally, the immigration update. This isn't real yet. So let me talk about something, because I've seen some people say, oh, things are so bad, and it's horrible, and all that, and unless you're one of the immigrants who's been detained, or know them, or working with them, or that involved, I don't know that it's been horrible. Our economy is very strong, and things have been going well. And so all the doom and gloom and blah, 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 it rings odd, right? And it hasn't happened yet, but I think that people need to understand that it can, and I mean, that kind of stuff that's what we're trying to avoid totally. I guess, I mean, it's when people are saying it's just so bad, it's like nothing has happened yet. Not yet. There's a lot of setups, and we're losing rights and on the edges, but it hasn't happened yet, and we can still turn it around pretty easily. And that's where the vote comes in. So my appeal, as it shall be on the next few episodes, is to make sure and vote. And just do it this time. Don't vote for Republicans. And some people are like, Roy, that's just too easy a solution. I know it is, but just start with that, and let's do that for 30, 40 years, and if it doesn't help, we'll try something else. But just stop voting for Republicans, but vote. Right? At the same time. Two things. Vote, don't vote for Republicans. We'll fix this. We can. So, with that, I shall bid you adieu. I do appreciate if you've been dropping by. It's always nice to have folk coming around. Got some beers. Don't have any beers. If I had beers, I'd be burping like mad. I'm already burping. I'm not even mad. Good night, everybody. See you guys next week. And maybe the week after that. All right. Good night. Thank you. Peace out.